Hey YouTube, Space Badger here, and welcome to my review of Kingdom Manga Chapter 588, Right Wing's Headquarters. Let's just jump straight in, work straight through, and see what we've got. Alright, so we start off with the Haishin unit, and specifically Buhei's 100-man cell, sitting over some pots of what appears to be basically just bubbling water. And as we all know at this point, Quinn's food supplies are basically all but gone. They're on day 11 of the Shukai Plains battle now with Zhao, and they're running on empty is an understatement, and they're just having a debate as to whether they should add more of what little spice and sort of seasoning and probably protein that they have to the meals to sort of at least give it a bit more of some flavor, add some more sustenance to the meal. But they're all just saying, look, if we do that, then we have literally nothing for tomorrow, and they're all just lamenting the fact really that it's purely just hot water. Although what they do start then talking about is some interesting rumors that have been happening across the camp, that apparently smelly powder is getting thrown across horse meat. And this was actually quite common for a long time, that in sort of larger cavalry battles all throughout the sort of throughout the last several centuries, well, specifically before modern warfare, when cavalry battles were really the main feature throughout ancient and medieval warring periods globally. The enemies would often throw poisonous powders across any dead horses or any wasted game that would be strewn across the battlefield, basically to eliminate the possibility that those supplies could be used by the enemies, or even in some cases their own troops, for sustenance, because often you also got animals getting plagues or the meat going rotten, which of course leads to the cavalry or the horses to die prematurely, and in that case some of those meats can turn and actually end up being toxic and causing widespread havoc and disease for troops of either your own or the opposing side. So it was quite common actually that warring battles, warring armies would sort of manipulate food supplies or potential sources of food supplies for their own strategic gains, which of course puts a fair bit of doubt into most of the men of Bruhei's cell, who are kind of looking very forlorn and depressed at this point, as they're sort of looking down at these pretty dire circumstances. And I have to admit, this would be terrifying for me personally. Like, I can't imagine the concept of having really grim, intimate, bloody hand-to-hand combat warfare, and then having nothing to go on at the end, like basically just being able to drink for survival. I mean, it's pretty amazing up to this point that the Haishin unit have survived and sort of fought as well as they have, given the circumstances, and I suppose that actually applies to all of Quinn's forces. At which point, as they're finally sort of accepting their fate and sort of consuming and drinking their soup, some army generals burst into the camp, which we recognize them being from Ohon's sort of generals and his lieutenants. And actually, one of them as well is a present from one of the commanders of the Akko army, asking where the Haishin unit's camps grounds are located. And Buhei kind of freaks out and immediately sort of bursts out where they are. And the Akko general is very good and goes, "You imbecile! What kind of fool would so easily reveal his commanding officer's whereabouts?" And Buhei freaks out some more. But they then proceed to thank them for their service and ride in that direction. And then other members of the Haishin unit, one of the lieutenants comes in, one of the guys who's been there from the very beginning actually, sort of comes through and is a bit frustrated that he wasn't able to be at the meeting point when the Akko army arrived, but he says, don't worry, we sent them off to the headquarters. And of course then the lieutenant of the Haishin unit turns around and says, "Don't you understand what's going on? We're setting up the Haishin unit to be the right wing's main headquarters." So from tomorrow, the High Shin unit will act as its core, which is amazing, right? This is Shin getting to the same stage and sort of level of seniority as Mouton has already displayed on the left wing when he was doing his excellent maneuvering. It's quite a number of chapters ago now when he was kind of leading the Zhao troops around, using some sort of, attack and dispersed maneuvers. And of course, given Ohon's critical condition, the same thing is being set up on the right wing, which is pretty fantastic opportunity for Shin, albeit the circumstances are pretty dire. So, yeah, we cut across, and we've still got Banyo talking to Shin, thanking him for coming, and thanking the Akko army commander for standing in temporarily. And then they start to discuss the proposition of Shin taking over the command of the right wing. And we've got a lot of the men from the Akko army giving credence to Banyo for sort of, realizing the dire situation that the right wing is in, and recognizing that the best chance that they have to bolster morale, maintain what semblance of momentum they've had and managed to build up over the last couple of days, is to trust the leadership to the High Shin unit. And he asks one of the Akko generals very point blank, are you willing to become the commander of the entire right wing Shin? With a lot of stark revelations and sort of expressions, surprise expressions across everyone's face. And immediately Shin just goes, is that all right with you, Ten? Because, of course, the implications for Ten is that she would therefore have to be the strategist for the entirety of the right wing, which is a significant bolster in the numbers of troops that she's ever had to manage / deploy in an army setting. And Kaya Ten has a moment to herself just to reflect on the possibility of the situation. And, of course, what other choice do I have? Which is pretty excellent. Shin, in excellent form, also just concurs with her and says, let's prepare and start planning to take down Zhao. As I was saying this in my last week's chapter review, this is good stuff by this is great character development for Shin, for Ten, just to really see now what they're made of, because this is the first time in the series whereby they actually have responsibility and for a unit that will directly influence the outcome of this battle. And if they fail, this battle fails. And, what we've always seen previously is the High Shin unit basically being either a splinter cell or an offensive cell that is particularly targeted with and effectively an assassination plot. So, a small concentrated attack wherever it is to apply pressure to a commander or a lieutenant or an individual of, specific notoriety from the opposing side, and to defeat that individual or general to, crush enemy morale. This is a whole different ballgame, though. This is actually, deciding and having direct control over the outcome of the positions, the tactics, the movements, interesting word, movements of that wing, which, of course, is one of the flanks to cover the army. And unsurprisingly then, we then jump back over to Ohon, who is standing across, Ohon's father, I should say, who's standing overlooking the entire battle, and one of his message carriers, comes to brief him about the situation on the right wing and explains that the High Shin unit has taken control. And of course, his only reaction is, ho, which of course we can take from that an implication that he was expecting this to be the case, especially after Ohon's defeat, and is clearly pleasantly surprised with the circumstances. And then the end of this chapter, which I didn't see coming at all, but of course makes perfect sense retrospectively. So we cut then from that scene to Gyo. Gyo, for those who don't remember, is the sort of main city that Quinn is trying to take for strategic positioning for their invasion of Zhao, and is basically what they've been doing for the last dozens of chapters, or prior to the Shukai Plains battle, I should say. They were going around pillaging, smaller or medium-sized cities in the surrounding district that Gyo resides or is the capital of. Forcing them upon sacking those cities or towns, forcing all the refugees to leave the city and take up residency in Gyo as refugees, in effect. And what they were doing and the plan, well, the perceived plan of doing this was to put pressure on the resources of Gyo so that it would effectively starve out and deplete their supplies at the same time that the Quinn army was obviously eating through theirs because Zhao cut off their supply route behind. So the idea was it's effectively a war of attrition. Now, what we got, though, was a lot of insight into Rubuki's thinking and the sort of statistics associated with the battle and the food supplies of both respective sides. And what we believed coming into the Battle of the Shukai Plains is that in terms of the attrition concept, there was no way for Quinn to win out. That Gyo, even regardless of all the refugees that they were having to house for the duration of the battle, that they had more food than Quinn, who of course Quinn only having 13 days of supplies, and as we've seen, that's getting very, very tenuous already from the 11th day. But then, so we cut into just two two refugees who've never seen before having a discussion about their movements and their, ultimate refugee residency being taken up in Gyo, and talking about how one of their friends, who they thought had been gravely injured when their city had been sacked, a guy called Takuta, had his face concealed because he had obviously been scarred or hurt or damaged in some way where they had to conceal his face. And they were saying that it's very bizarre because one evening they went to see, or they were walking past his camping spot, and his face was unveiled, and so the bandages had fallen away. He was clearly looking or doing something, and it wasn't their friend. The face hidden underneath the bandages was a different person. But what they're then saying is how strange that is, because if it's a different guy, that means they must have been carrying him from the point at which the city was sacked. So they had been helping who they perceived to be their friend for days to sort of ensure he made it into the city of Gyo and take up a refugee status and, acquire safety by the walls of Gyo, that actually this wasn't the case whatsoever. And then they go on to say that this is not only true of their friend Takuta, there have been other people who have clearly been refugees of other sacks of other cities, which has resulted in multiple people basically infiltrating Gyo. Because what is strongly implied here is that Quinn, upon sacking the city, has very cleverly slipped their own troops under the veil of these sort of disfigured, wounded soldiers, covering their faces, covering probably their mouths so they don't speak, so that they move as a part of the refugee groups that are dispersing and ultimately then residing in Gyo as installed agents to service Quinn's goals, which is genius. I mean, this is the ace in the hole that we didn't know was coming. I mean, imagine what's going to happen here is that they are going to ultimately either infiltrate or destroy the food supplies / the barricades or the main gates, so that a Quinn battalion can either come in and sack the city behind enemy lines, behind Rabuku's army where they're battling on the Shukai Plains, or do something else within the city to cause mayhem and potentially split the focus of Zhao's army. Very good, very clever, well done. I didn't predict this whatsoever. I was really impressed by this twist of events, and I am excited to see when this card comes into play, because they've obviously, Quinn's left this very late in the game, so again, clearly quite deliberately, assuming to get as many people into Gyal before they start their infiltration plans. So, man, I'm hype. Kingdom is so good. I mean, Kingdom is, as a manga, very different from everything else I've ever read. It's just the sheer scale of it. It always feels like you really understand the macro decisions that are getting made by the commanders and the influence that they directly have on the outcomes of these wars. And that was, that's what these, ancient Chinese wars were all about. The art of warfare came and was birthed of this period because of the direct implications that one move, one mistake, one tactic could have for the outcome for thousands of lives, or in this case, an entire state of ancient China. So I'm hype. I imagine you're hype if you're watching this. Did you like this chapter? I love this chapter from a strategic standpoint and from a character development standpoint. I have to admit there wasn't a whole lot going on otherwise, because I'm eager to see what Shin will now do on the battlefield. But in just understanding the delicacy and the tactical nuance that is at play in this battle, it makes sense that Quinn wouldn't leave this down to being a battle of strength. So yeah, great stuff. Probably 3.5 out of 5 kind of chapter. Absolutely loved it. If you liked anything I had to say, if you liked my review, if you liked my thoughts, please like, comment, subscribe. Please subscribe. That's the main thing. Big red button just below the video. You know what to do. I'm Space Badger. I hope you enjoyed it. Peace.